Well, thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to be hosting this event. You may know me. My name is Lynn Bartan, and I'm the director of A.P.E.X events here. I'm really excited about today. Today's talk is entitled My Journey into a New World, and I'll tell you a little bit about Claudia in a minute. The format for today is Claudia is going to come up and tell you her story and just tell you all that's gone on in her life and all the great things that she's been doing. And then we're going to have a little bit of an opportunity for a question and answer time. Those of you who have been attending the events for the last year or so know that we typically are not doing a full-blown Q&A, but we really thought that today it was really important to give an opportunity for asking questions, and I know it was really important for Claudia as well. Just that outreach of getting in touch with you and making those connections and becoming part of her family. So let me tell you a little bit about Claudia. Claudia Bradshaw's work is focused on touching the hearts of those who are in need of support. She wishes to share her story with anyone who is questioning, struggling, or seeking understanding. She works as an ally to the LGBTQ plus community and is a loving mother to all. And this is one of the things that when you talk to her and when you listen to her, you get immediately. A self-proclaimed hugger with a big hug and a big smile and just ready to offer that support and encouragement to everyone. So please join me today in welcoming Claudia Bradshaw.
That is great, okay? Anyway, I'm so thankful that I have this opportunity to just tell you a little bit about my experiences. But my first thing I will tell you is that this is my son, Braden, who came out to me about in 1998. And this is my daughter, Tanya. So these are the ones, Tanya's a supportive of GLBTQ people too. So and she didn't need to do it because of me. She just did it because she loves her brother too. That's another reason, okay? But the first thing that when he came home, it was a wonderful weekend. We were at the cabin at Kolob, and it was gorgeous. It was in August, hot as hell. But the cabin was cooler, and we thought he'd just come home just to have a nice cool weekend with us, my husband and I. And then when we got ready to go down off the mountain, my husband said to me, he said, well, you and Braden need to have a little time alone. So why don't you ride with him? So it gave him an excellent opportunity to tell me one of the hardest things that it's ever been for him to tell me. Because I was so active in the LDS church, it made him very, very apprehensive about coming to tell me. So we get halfway down the mountain, and he says, Mom, this is going to hurt you so much, but for my integrity, I feel I need to tell you that I am gay. Needless to say, it was quite a stunner for me because parents can live in denial forever, okay? And I was the queen of ignorance, and so there we go. You have both things, so I knew I had a lot to learn. I said, isn't there something you can do? He says, you know, stupid. And he said, Mom, don't you think I would have done it before I came home and told you? So that made such common sense. Luckily, we have been so close with each other that it helped. So I kind of leaned on him then. But to be honest with you, as soon as you come out to your parents go right in the closet. And sometimes they stay there for years. But his being willing to have the conversation with me really helped. I was also working in the temple as an ordinance worker in the LDS church at that time. So you can imagine how hard that made it for him to come and tell me. But anyway, by the time he went back to Vegas where he was living, he was all relieved. I could just feel this big weight had been lifted off of his shoulders, and then I felt it on me then. then what was I supposed to do, right? And as ignorant as I was about it, it made it even more difficult. So I was still going back to the temple in the mornings. As soon as I got done on that shift, I would go home, and I called him. And he was in Vegas working. And he just was so willing to have a conversation. So that's two of the big things that I say was the big key to he and I working our way through this, was he was willing to listen, he was willing to have the conversation, and I had to know, I had to have some answers. And I turned to him for that. So I called him so many times, I know I was driving him crazy. So finally, but he was sweet and patient about it. Finally one day he said, "Mom, I'll send you a book." He said, "It's the book that I read," and he said, "I cried through the whole book. Would you please read that book?" So he sent me the book, and it's called Prayers for Bobby. It's a true story about a young man who he came out to his parents when he was 14, and his mother kept putting up signs in the house saying, "You can change." Until after a few years like that, and he kept trying and trying, and he finally, he came out when he was 14, and he was 18 when he jumped off of an overpass on the freeway into the path of a semi-truck. Can you imagine the terrible destruction, the terrible pain that his mother felt to lose her son like that? And so I read that book. And what she did, though, with the book was that she told her story, and then she included Bobby's journal entries in that book. That's why it was so educational for me. It gave me a chance to kind of crawl inside of what was going on inside of Brady. The fear and the self-hate was so huge. So that book really was a turner for me anyway. But I still had a lot of things to process in me. How do you put this together with what they're telling me over here and what the reality is? So I had quite a time to go through. I was lucky enough to meet up with some people who were part of it was called Family Fellowship. These were all LDS people who had gay children. And I got to know some of them. And I would drive clear to Salt Lake, my husband and I did, to a lot of those meetings. That helped a lot too. So a lot of this was just like education. But in all of that I had learned in the temple to me, it was all about love. So I couldn't even they said, take a little bit of the temple out into the world. The only thing you can take out of there is love. And so that's what I did. I just took out of that. And as I met more and more people who were GLBT, my love for them grew, and for all people, okay? And so that's how one of the beginnings. Another one that was a life-changing thing for me. I just got to get back here to my notes just a minute here. About 3 months after Brayden came out to me, Matthew Shepard was murdered. Do any of you remember that? Do you know about Matthew Shepard? That was horrific. And I was so afraid that something like that might happen with Brayden. He said, "Oh, Mom, you'll be okay. I'll be okay." But I know Judy Shepard. I've met her. The thing that I admire about her is that she had the strength, even after she had lost her son, to speak up. We've had other parents who, if their son does commit suicide or whatever, they will not say anything about it. But so the parents were out, and that she spoke up about this awful murder. So these are the kind of things that just scared the hell out of me. So anyway, it's pretty hard to stay in anything else but that. But then Braden said to me, Mom, he had gone to this workshop, and it was called The Experience. The Experience was set up, I think it's probably been about 40 years ago. And it was set up just to help people come out, to live their life with honesty and with love, and with all the things you want your child to have or whatever. And that's what he had gone through in order to prepare to come and tell me, to come out to me. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So it was a whole weekend in Las Vegas where they had this workshop. So I went down and the first thing we had to do was all stand up and tell our story, to tell who we were and why we were there. Anyway, Braden looked at the people that were in there, because there were a lot of transgender people, and one intersex, and several, just a huge variety of people. He said, oh, this is way too gay for my mom. He was going to yank me out of there. Thank heaven he didn't, because that was one of the best things that I could have experienced. It really was life-changing. My daughter noticed it when I came home from that experience, that something had really shifted in me. And I could see that there were people that I just needed to love no matter what. So do you know that one out of every 1,000 babies are born with ambiguous genitalia? That does not mean that it's specific. So that was I was experiencing, seeing, meeting so many people who were different. And I didn't think I was going to do anything like P-Flag or anything, but he did tell me about P-Flag. And that was what was cool, too, for me, is he gave me a little insight as to what P-Flag is all about. Okay, now P-Flag was started by a woman. Her name was Jane Manford. She lived in New York City, and this was in 1969. There was a big, they had a big riot at the Stonewall Inn. Do any of you know about the Stonewall riots? We do have some. Good, okay. The Stonewall riots were, this woman, Jane Manford, her son was there that night. What was happening, and this seems hard to believe now, that in New York City, but the Stonewall was where the bar where a lot of the gay people, they just gathered to socialize. It was the only way they could. But the cops would come and beat hell out of them and haul them off to jail every week, at least once a week. Does that seem unbelievable now in today's world? So that was what happened at Stonewall. Braden was just not even thought of at that time. Okay? But I remember seeing this one on the news about these people rioting, and I thought, what is wrong with them? Why are they so angry? Now I understand why they were so angry. It didn't take long to understand. If the police are coming in and beating up on them and taking them to jail just because they're gay, that was horrendous. So thank heaven they had the power and the will to do that. Now, there was a young man named Morty Manford there. This happened to be Jean Manford's son. So he was there at that riot, and they rioted for 3 days. When they rioted, though, the cops were so afraid, they locked themselves in the bar, and they rioted out on the street for 3 days. That was pretty cool, wasn't it? It's not necessarily something I would have wanted to do, because but I had no idea. I was thinking, I don't know, what's wrong with those people? It's so easy to have this snap judgment, isn't it? And I thought it would never be anything that I would have to deal with, of course. Anyway, a few weeks after that Stonewall riot, Morty was out, this is her son, was out passing out flyers for a gay rights meeting. And these guys came along, and they beat hell out of him. And he ended up having to be taken to the hospital because he was beaten so bad. And guess what? 2 cops stood by with their hands behind their back and didn't do anything. So, but his mother had the guts to, so she was furious. She's a school teacher. Do we have that picture by any chance, or is that not going to be here today? Anyway, she was so angry about it. She tried to get the story of her son being beaten like that and the cops watching with their hands behind their back to get that story in the newspaper. None of them would print it. They didn't want to go crossways with the police. But finally, she kept at it. She's a pretty persistent lady. She kept at it and kept at it till she found a newspaper that would print that story. And then when that was printed, she got all these calls from other parents. Pretty cool, huh? And then they got ready for their big gay pride parade in 1969. I think it was the first one that they really did, you know. I think there were others earlier, but my own opinion. But anyway, as far as really being public and really pushing. But it was also during the civil rights movement at that time too. So I think the gays were taking strength even from the civil rights movement too. So, but anyway, Jean Manford, she was so furious. But anyway, the people started calling her. And then they asked her if she would walk in the gay pride parade. She says, I will if I can carry a sign. So she was a school teacher. She knew how to make those little signs, you know. So she made this sign. And it said, parents, unite and speak up for your children. And Morty walked with her in that parade. It was the beginning of P.E.X. So she started having meetings in New York City. And then they started having meetings in L.A. I think the woman that headed that up was named Starr, but last name was Starr. But anyway, now we have P.E.X. chapters in a lot of the little towns across the nation and even worldwide. And now what P.E.X. really, their main goals are is to educate, support, and to advocate for equal treatment. That's why I decided I wanted to do the P.E.X. thing, because I wanted to be able to advocate for equal treatment. So that's what I've been doing now for quite a few years. But it's so simple because I just love my all of my gay friends and my straight parents, those who will. The biggest problem is getting parents to come to a meeting or even to speak up public. So a lot of the parents that I've come in contact with have still been hesitant about coming. I've had them in my home, so it was easy, safe, you know, not beautiful all the time, but that's why. So I tried to do it that way, but it ended up being that it became more for the gay community. They started coming. The more I gave out love, the more they came. And so it has been one of the sweetest journeys that I could have ever asked for. Thank you so much for having the courage to come and tell me, because it did change my life. It made my life so much better. If I want to look at it selfishly, I think it was one of the best things that I could have ever done. But you couldn't have told me that at first, right? Anyway, now, if any of you have any questions, I'd just like to open it up to question and answer. And you can ask Braden the questions too. He's being shy, but you know.
A seat for you here.
Okay.
Braden there.
see how graceful I can do this. I'm going to go around.
Yeah.
I'm so short. Excuse me.
So one of the things when we talked about doing this was that was really important to Claudia was to have a dialogue. So she loves questions and would love to hear from you, and it can be anything. And also Braden is here. He's come out from Chicago. So if you have any questions as students, family members, community, whatever you'd like to know, we'd love to just offer this time as an opportunity to have a discussion. So I think I saw a question here.
I'm wondering, how did this affect your membership in the LDS Church, and how did you kind of come to reconcile that?
And just to kind of repeat them so everybody could hear, the question was how did this affect your membership in the LDS Church,
Mm-hmm.
and how did you deal with that and come to terms with that going forward?
That was the hardest part, I think. But they didn't excommunicate me or anything. I just dropped out because when I was sitting in the temple that one day, it just hit me. It was right after I had gone down for the experience when there were so many people there, and I was in the celestial room, really. And I thought, wait a minute, we're doing temple work for these people while they're dead, and they're throwing them away here and now. At that time, they were excommunicating them. And that just didn't sit right with me at all. And so it took me quite a while because I loved doing what I was doing in the temple, but I loved my son, and I wanted to support him. But then I saw a bigger picture that I needed to be supportive to all people, not just certain ones. So it was my personal journey. I'm not saying every mother has to do it this way. Everybody is going to do it their own way. It's one of the hardest things, I think, that LDS parents are faced with. There are a lot of people that I know in the family fellowship group who they're still stay true and faithful to the church. And I ended up dropping out of my job as in the temple, And I ended up dropping out. Church became, instead of a place of peace and hope, it became a place of deep sorrow when it didn't include all of my children. In fact, that's why I can't pledge my all to a religion that doesn't include all of God's children. So that's just my line. Okay.
And if I could add one thing that I think is really cool, and this is the thing I tell everybody when I'm bragging to my friends about my mom, it is that it was what I believe was the practice of her faith. She had these epiphanies when she was in the temple, when she was doing temple work, practicing in the true spirit of the faith of what it was about. So it's just interesting that was her motivation, and maybe made her leave from that, but unfortunately she was practicing it. I guess.
Yeah.
And I think I saw another question. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's awesome that you, Claudia, and you, Braden, have been able to follow your heart and follow what you feel is right, and been able to support and love your family. I personally am bisexual as well as an active member of the LDS faith, and so I constantly find myself having to defend the other side of me when both are equally a part of me. So I guess what would you recommend to basically be patient with people who are trying to tell me what I am and what I'm not, from both sides of the picture?
And just to repeat the question, so he was asking about how to. I'm sorry. Can you say it one more time? I'm trying to do this for video.
Yeah. Just how to be more patient and loving towards people in both communities who might not quite understand where I'm coming from, having myself identifying with both groups.
how to be more patient and loving with both communities when you identify with both groups, but being patient to both groups as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I found through this, my personal journey, is that I'm the authority in my life. You're the authority in your life. You know you better than anyone else. Don't let somebody else tell you how to live your life. They might try, but you do your own. You know, it's not up to me to be your boss either, right?
The
Just
only,
as long.
yeah.
Go ahead.
The other part, when I came out to her, is I was in a really good headspace. So for me, I was in a really kind of healthy, self-actualized place. Old man, I was 26, I know. So, but that gave a lot of privilege for me to be able to do that from an empowered place, because to me, and the other thing I said to her was, I'm telling you this because I want you in my life, not because I don't want you in my life. There's a lot of conversations we aren't having because I have to dodge everything. There's this football field of things that you don't want to get to the core, so you just can't, you know, sometimes do. So I think with what you're talking about in terms of relational, is just remember that you're having a conversation with them because you want relationship, because you're open to that. If not, you shut it down. And that might happen also if people can't be respectful.
Other questions? Other things you're wondering or things you'd like to know? Yes.
I'm curious. We know Claudia is a rock star. And I would like to adopt her as my own mom.
Come on.
But my question, Braden, is how did your dad handle all this? I mean, were they kind of like a unit in support, or was there a division?
And in case you didn't hear in the back, he was wondering how Braden's dad, you know, dealt with the news and the communication and the relationship moving forward.
My biological father had passed away when I was 13. My mom remarried when I was 12. She remarried when I was 13 to another rock star. A quiet, supportive, just rock that was behind her 100%. Like, he has marched in the Salt Lake Gay Pride Parade. It's one of my favorites. But, you know, Claren was quiet, but loving and supportive, and just didn't seem to care all that much, but knew it mattered to be there and to support. And, like, how many trips to Salt Lake for meetings did they drive back and forth? And he was there all along, pushing, supporting financially, listening, talking. Like, she could have done it on her own. We all can. But he was, the backbone.
He was.
I think
He
quiet
was the safe.
force.
He was my safe haven as far as someone to talk to when I was not willing to come out to anybody. And so as I read each book, I told him about each book. And he was such a wonderful listener and loving with me, so that it really helped and he wasn't in where he was invested with it and think you had to whip him into shape or anything, because he wasn't invested that way at all. So it was the perfect dynamic, really, because I needed somebody who would listen to me, one of the first things, and then his support for me was amazing. Like I said, he walked in the Gay Pride Parade in Salt Lake City with me several times, or 2 or 3 times anyway.
I actually have a follow-up question, is that, do you have any advice on, that sounds like a perfect scenario, of support,
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for students or perhaps parents whose spouse, or they have a little bit of a divide there between the mother and father? Do you have any advice from on the spouse side of things, or perhaps for the parent-student, how they
Well,
might
they-
approach that if there's a divide between the parents?
Ooh, I don't know about that because it's so individual-like. You know, each family is so different in how they handle something like this. Sometimes the father has not been willing to talk at all about it. Sometimes the mother's willing to be gung-ho. So it's just like any other thing in a marriage. You can't always agree. And allowing that other person to be that individual, I think, is such an important part of a marriage. Just allow, and so I don't have any
Okay.
magic. I wish I had some magic, you know, other than still going back to you are the authority in your life, whether you're the mother or whether you're the father or whether you're the child. You are the authority in your life. So, you know, you can't let somebody else tell you how to do it. Clarence didn't try to tell me how to do it. He damn well better not have. And he kind of knew it, don't you think?
You know, and I want to just add to that family, whether you're an uncle or an aunt, a cousin, nephew, brother, sister, it's equally important. You want your family in your life. And I mean, my sister, just the same level of support. Always. And fostered that support with her children. And I got to continue that growth with my nephews, which were so important. So, you know, you can be there for people as friends. I have one of my dearest friends from high school, and she, you know, always, you know, it matters on a lot of levels.
I thought, did I see another question? Did you have a
I
follow-up?
had a follow-up.
Yeah, please.
You both had a prominent position in St. George, if I understand right. Was there any backlash in the community? I mean, whether in the church or whether just in St. George in general?
And again, just in the back, if you didn't get a chance to hear, asking about any backlash for the positions that they held in St. George for either of you.
I was so, Braden was living in Las Vegas at the time, so that far as prominence in the St. George. And I was really relatively new in St. George, you know, also because I had married Clarence, I guess it was over 30 years now, but my husband he was prominence because he was the car dealer there, but I never heard anything as far as the community, you know, anything. I was the one that set the parameters on the visiting teachers were coming to my home for a while, and home teachers, and I allowed them to, but I also told them what I thought about the gay rights thing, and I told them some of my stories, okay? Whether they like it or not, if they were going to come to my house, they were going to get a dose of it. So, and then when they started the Prop 8 thing, I finally just said, I'm done. Don't come back. You tell those people up there in Salt Lake they're tearing families apart. And they did. It's horrible that it still tore families apart. So that's just how I handled it. But my husband didn't care one way or the other as far as that part goes either. He was surprised. I think I was surprised by him that he didn't say, oh, I might not be able to sell cars or something. He never let that get in his way at all.
You had mentioned some books that you read, and I wonder if there are any titles that you might share that were particularly meaningful that maybe other people might be interested in reading?
Okay, there's one called Goodbye, I Love You. It was by Carol Lynn Pearson. She was LDS, and they told her, tell them to go ahead and get married, you'll get over it. So she ended up, they got married, had 4 children, and it finally ended in divorce. And her husband got AIDS. she took him back into her home and took care of him and taught her children that this we love, this is your father. And so the book is called Goodbye, I Love You, and she has written another one, and I've given you some of them, but I will bring more.
Okay.
It's called No More Goodbyes, Circling the Wagons Around Our Gay and Lesbian Loved Ones. Those, if you're involved with LDS, that's really a good one. Oh, let me see, what other ones have I read that I just carried. My biggest problem was I couldn't find any place, a bookstore that carried all of them. So I was going to Las Vegas to clean house for my mother because she was in need at that time. And it was a good time for me to go visit her, and then I would go to the bookstores, and I came home with a whole bundle of books. I still got quite a few books in my home, quite gay library, okay?
And we can definitely get some titles and maybe put them up on the website. And
Yeah.
so anybody who's interested in the future, we'd love to put those titles and authors so that they're available to anybody. A question, yes.
That's good. That's a good idea, because I've got more, and I could send them to you. I can just email some of the names.
Perfect. That would
Okay.
be perfect. Yes.
I'm a child of the 60s, and I've always been for human rights. Living right now is making me so sad and so worried, because I've dealt with being a woman, not gay, but in support, not from the Middle East, but in support.
Uh-huh.
And this whole idea that right now we've gone so far backwards, I don't know what to do. I was so thrilled with all the progress and marriage, that it was so wonderful. And now we're going so far back, and I thought in marching in the 60s, now it was easy because it was New York City. It wasn't St. George.
Yeah.
And that we really had made so much progress that now the whole idea that everyone is a child of God, that everyone deserves support, finally. And then, of course, it's the churches that were being the worst about it. And so I'm not sure what to do at this point. It's really painful, because of course everyone is equal, and we're in a time now where people who don't think that are in power, and now saying, no, there's only one kind of person that has power, and he's a white man from Anglo-Saxon background, and everybody else is throwaway. So what do we do?
But I want to ask you a question in response. A question right back at you. Are we really going so far back? I think that we have a horrible president, to put it. I mean, I don't care. I just think we have a monster in the White House, and it's really sad. But I don't know that we're going so far back. I feel like women are finding their voice more than ever. Youth are coming out earlier. I don't see us, and yes, leadership is maybe not on our side, but that doesn't mean that you can't mobilize and do things on the grassroots and locally. And it makes a huge difference, especially Cedar City. Come on. You guys are here. You guys came out, took time out of your day for this. People do care, and I do think people are invested. So I don't know if...
Well, thanks for that.
I'm sorry. Hey, that was a white man answering you, telling you, hey, not so bad, lady. Not so bad, lady.
I'm Tanya, and I'm Mom's daughter. Anyway, I got to graduate from SUU with a degree in sociology, and because of Georgia Beth Thompson.
The
there.
mic.
Here's Georgia Beth.
The mic.
I'm so glad you're here. And that question just made me think of all of the, like, if you timeline just since Braden came out, I remember when Mom told me that she was going to start PFLAG, I seriously said this to her, people are going to burn crosses in your front yard. Like, oh my gosh, don't do that. And she said, it starts at grassroots. And St. George 20 years ago was a little bit different than it is now. And so I love that question. And when you ask that question, think back at so many changes that have taken place. I remember exactly where I was in New Mexico when DOMA got recalled. She calls me, and she's in tears in her living room because progress is being made. And it's being made right here in Springdale when they have gay pride. It's so fun. And most recently, the advances they're doing, HIV/AIDS testing. There's been so many cool things. And on the sociological level, I get to see fair housing come to play. And that was a big issue here in Cedar City 20 years ago, because this is where I raised my children. And now when my grandbabies get to see a beautiful transgendered woman walking down the street and my grandbabies say, hi, because this is just a person who they get to say hi to, and they love this individual. They learned it from these two. And I'm so honored that I get to be a part of this, just a little bit. But thank you for your question, because there's been amazing advancements. And like Braden said, I think women more have a voice now, just as much or more, because they are being challenged.
Except for dreamers. They're being
Yeah, dreamers.
Yeah.
And I think we have another question back here. Yeah.
I heard that we're going to have a PFLAG group here in St. George. Are you still going to do that?
In Cedar, I think they're.
Here, I mean Cedar, yeah.
First and third Wednesdays at the library, public library, from 8 to 9 p.m.
So,
Oh.
yeah. So just to make sure that everybody got a chance to hear that, let me make sure I said it right. First and third Wednesdays at the library, and the time?
8 to 9 p.m.
8 to 9 p.m. And that's in the town library. Town library.
Can that also go on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. And so maybe if in my team, either Jordan or Roxy, you can make sure to write that stuff down for us, that would be great. And I think we have another question.
There's some paperwork that has to be done, but until that's all finished, we're still meeting.
Okay, and we'll
That's good.
and we'll get the information so everybody knows all of that. Great. Okay, good. And we have a question back here.
So there are many gay people who never tell their families or their parents. So what may be the strength back in that time is like that person
I can't hear her.
go ahead and tell their mom. I think she'll tell you what it is. Back in that time,
I'll ask her.
Mama, she's
We-
going to repeat the question.
So you want to and ask Braden that.
All right,
yeah?
I just wanted to make sure that we could.
So Braden, the question is for you, and the question is, she was saying it that there's so many people who don't tell their parents, especially in a religious family, and so she was saying how brave that was, and what ultimately helped you make that decision. I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but maybe if you could go into a little more detail about the process of making that decision for you.
Well, yeah, I think
And if you don't mind grabbing the mic, sorry.
I think when I went through the experience, and I was 26, and it was the first time I could say the words, I'm gay. And so when I couldn't deny it, our family is kind of, it's close, and I don't think they would have let me get away with much for very long. And I'd met someone. And so I was also then head over heels moving to St. Louis. And so that also kind of moved that along. But ultimately, it was this workshop just changed everything because I realized, you know, another book, Coming Out as an Act of Love, it really is. It's really,
It is a
you're
good
coming out to people because you want them in your life, not because you want to keep shutting them out. And I think I had finally gotten that, and it took me a long time, and I told her, I hope it doesn't take you as long to accept me and get through this as it did for me. So I always say, be patient with parents.
He was.
You know, and I would still, you know, and she made missteps. But what I knew, and there were harsh comments, but what I always knew was where her heart was coming from is she wanted to understand, and she was grappling. So, you know, I think
Thankfully, he was patient.
you have to let people have their process, and if they're doing it for the right reasons, it can be helpful.
Mhm.
Other questions? Yes.
Right. I'm curious, how would both of you, I guess, as activists, and you not being gay yourself, how would you define being an ally to a community for those who aren't lesbian or gay or bisexual or
Uh-huh.
trans? Like, how do you define being an ally?
For those in the back, he's asking, how would you define being an ally as not part of the LGBTQ plus community? How would you define that? So,
It's just mostly just that I just love people. So if I'm at an event, they don't have to be gay for me to love them, right? I just love people. So it doesn't, you know, it's just another human being, you know. It's the thing that was good for me was when I went to the experience. That time when there were a lot of transgender and that helped me begin to understand and to begin to see this is a human being here that needs to be loved, not judged. And so part of it was also what I had learned in my religion was that you love everyone. I had learned that all my life. And then, so I couldn't understand the idea of excluding someone because of the color of their skin or because of their sexual orientation or anything. So a lot of it's what you find in your soul, I guess, when you just meet people.
So when you asked that question, I thought that was kind of a hard question. I was like, ooh. But I actually think it's a really easy question because I look at my friends and family and so many wonderful people along the way, and they were allies because they loved and supported me. And they want to know who I'm dating. They want me to be happy, and they want to be a part of my life. And it starts there. And I think as you see opportunities and things that move you, I mean, there's some things that really get me fired up in other areas outside of the LGBTQ arena.
I want to speak to that, and I guess for me, what I saw is that they became great listeners, and it's interesting to see Mom at the gym because she'll be on her little treadmill or walking around the thing, and she'll begin a conversation with someone, and she'll say, you know what, I do this work and I have a gay child. And it's crazy how many people will say, oh, you know what, us too. It's usually not a lead-off thing, but I think in being an ally, being an ally.
For those in the back, they're talking about all the various places where these conversations can happen, like the DMV or the gym or all these things.
When we talk about sexuality, it's that taboo within our culture. And so when it becomes normalized and when it becomes, what does an ally look like? Oh, you know what? I have a gay brother too. Let's talk about it. And a lot of times people just need to be heard. And when somebody asked the question about my father, and it was so cool to watch him, he listened. I don't think that he came at the same time that Mom came out of her closet, but he listened intently to Mom unravel and finally get to a place of her truth. And so to be a sounding board and to be available to someone who is working through the process. I thought I was very open when Braden came out, and I struggled. And I went through my own process of, well, wait, he's supposed to have the 2.5 kids and marry Shannon and, live happily ever after.
And be a Republican.
And be a Republican.
That was actually her cargo. Do you believe that? She was like, that's cool, I'm fine with that. She's like, but you can't become a Democrat. She let go of that, but...
And I think we have another question here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, well, either one.
No, go ahead.
Ladies first.
Just to tail off on that, I think that, I'm from an older generation, I'm 55, so I applaud the younger generation. I think the fact that we are talking about all these issues, and it's not just, like you said, it's not just gay and lesbian or, transsexual or intersex or any of that. What it really boils down to is there's a lot of discrimination in various categories, like, weight discrimination and age discrimination and racial issues and so on and so forth. And I think the more common these people become present in our everyday lives, they just have jobs and families and they just live like everybody else. The more we go, what were we so worried about? I mean, they're not that different. So it's more about like exposure and learning more about it and understanding it, like what you did as far as learning more, but talking more about it like we're doing here and having classes and because I didn't understand some of the issues, I'll be honest. Not that I was in any way, oh God, I hate those people, but I just didn't understand it. So because of that kind of ignorance, it was a little bit harder for me to put it in the mainstream of acceptance. But I mean, love, like you said, is everything, and we should be loving and accepting everybody regardless of their differences or their, unique characteristics. That's what makes the world interesting.
Oh.
Just want to say
So that's really a celebration of everything that you've been saying. So great. And you had a question.
Yeah, so about, I think, 2 years ago, we had a conflict of transsexuals in the bathroom in Virginia. And I'm pretty sure there was a moment, pretty sure 60s baby here would agree with me, that we never expected that in the election, that same state would elect a transsexual for their governor.
Yeah,
So that was
that's
a
cool,
huge,
isn't it?
huge progress for the LGBT community. And my question is, if this progression continues, do you see it probably opening up more to the LDS community? And if so, would you return to the church?
Interesting question. He was talking about his experience in Virginia, in case anybody didn't hear, and then asking as this conversation continues and as things keep evolving, if it became more accepting or more a part of the LDS church and LDS faith, would you consider going back? Did I get it right? Yeah.
Only if I maintain that I am the authority in my life. And one more big if. I would go back if they would let me teach a class on reality.
Well, great. Are there any other questions? We're getting close to the end. We have another one. Yes.
I worked on the campus for years and then part-time. I'm not on the campus all the time now. But I sense that this place is sometimes safe and sometimes not. And I would like some ideas about how whoever you were, male, female, your skin color, your religion, your family background, your sexual orientation, that you would welcome. And I think there's an upper rhetoric, there are some organizations that are supportive, but at the whole campus, we talk about we're a community of learners, but we don't quite get there. So at least that's my perception. So I'd like some ideas, not maybe from the speakers, but also from others. How do we make this a place where you're just safe with whoever you are? And this is your home, and you belong here. And I just love to see as you get there, and I don't think we're ready.
I think it's an evolving process, and I can speak a little bit to this and then also point you in a couple of other directions. And maybe we have some of the allies on campus here and definitely can maybe make the connection and talk more about this. We're also going to be talking about this more, resources available, what we're doing on campus, what we're doing in the community today on the radio at 3 p.m. for the A.P.E.X hour. Also, there are a lot of other things that are happening with our Center for Diversion and Inclusion, which I know we have our faculty and staff representation here. We also have recently a brand new addition to campus, which is our Chief Diversity Officer, who reports directly to upper administration and is really at a very prominent position in terms of the hierarchy, and she is here today as well. So I know there are some strides being made, and we will continue that conversation and try to put more things available on the website as well. So I think we're making progress, and I think it's a work in progress at the same time.
Well, and I'd invite all of us to decide that we were that kind of community. We might not understand everybody, but let's be willing to take them at face value. They own their own experience, and just enjoy them.
Right, as she
You
was
miss-
saying,
you miss
yeah.
so many people if you're afraid of them. Don't be afraid of them. Well, I'm not saying don't be afraid of anybody, but I'm yeah, well, don't be afraid of people.
Don't be afraid of
Miss
people.
half your life if you're afraid to enjoy somebody who may not be just
Right, and I think that's a great sentiment to perhaps end on. Claudia and Braden will be here also if anybody had any questions or want to say hello and didn't feel comfortable doing it in sort of this big venue. They will be around and available for the next half hour or so, so please feel free to say hello. If you have any questions or want to know any resources, feel free to ask me, and I can try to get you pointed in the right direction. And then again, we have several supportive entities available here in the room today who maybe can help with the meet and greet and all of that. So I'd like, on behalf of A.P.E.X events, to thank you so much, Claudia and Braden.